She screamed, "Get out!" before I even crossed the porch. The sound split the afternoon air like glass. I stood frozen on the front steps, the baby's faint cry somewhere inside that house, muffled by walls that used to feel like home. My heart beat so loud I could hear it in my ears. I wanted to believe I had misheard her, but Emma's eyes were steady, full of anger that felt rehearsed. "I'm Helen, 57, a retired nurse who's spent her life cleaning wounds and keeping people calm. I never thought my own son's wife would be the one drawing blood without a touch." She clutched the door frame like a guard, blocking the way. Behind her, I saw my son, David, standing still, hands jammed in his pockets, eyes on the floor. He didn't say a word. The stroller near the hall was new, the ribbon still tied to its handle. For a moment, I thought of the gifts I'd sent before the birth, the tiny yellow blanket, the box of powder I chose after smelling every brand in the store. I remembered wrapping them under warm light at my kitchen table, humming the same lullaby I sang to David when he was born. The tune had always meant safety. It drifted through my head now, half memory, half ache. I had imagined that song carrying through this house too, but it died at the threshold between us. The afternoon sun was bright enough to sting my eyes. I set the gift bag on the porch rail. "I came to meet my grandchild," I said softly. "You told me to come today." Emma's jaw tightened. Plans changed. "Leave, Helen, now." Her voice shook, but her words didn't. My hand hovered over the stroller's folded cover, wanting to glimpse the baby's face, to see if she had David's dark hair. But I didn't move closer. The sharp edge in Emma's tone told me she would slam the door even harder if I did. I turned away slowly. The porch boards creaked under my shoes. The door clicked shut behind me, the latch echoing like a lock on something more than wood. I reached the gate and looked back once. Curtains moved, maybe the baby's movement, maybe Emma watching. Either way, I was already erased from that picture. In the car, I sat gripping the steering wheel, listening to the wind rattle dry leaves against the hood. My phone buzzed once, a message from Emma, short and final. "Please respect our space." I read it twice, trying to match the voice from this morning when she'd texted, "Come around 3, baby's awake." The times were only hours apart, but the worlds felt years away. The drive home took 15 minutes, but I barely remember it. I remember the silence afterward, the kind that settles deep, heavy enough to muffle thought. I made tea without tasting it, let it cool untouched on the counter. By 5 o'clock, the sky was low and pink, the color that always made me think of bedtime stories and soft nightgowns. I glanced at the old rocking chair near the window. It still squeaked when I nudged it with my foot, that same rhythmic creak I once kept time to while singing David to sleep. My phone rang 2 hours later. I didn't answer at first. When I finally looked, her name glowed on the screen. Emma. Her voice came through shaking, crying. "Please come back," she said. "I need help. I can't do this alone." Every instinct in me, every nurse, every mother wanted to run back. But something in her tone sounded off, rehearsed again. Maybe someone told her to call. Maybe it was guilt. Or maybe she had realized what it meant to close a door on the only person who would still show up. I said nothing. The silence stretched until she whispered, "Helen, please?" I ended the call. Slowly, quietly. I placed the phone face down on the table. That night, I walked to the porch and looked out at the dark street. A streetlight flickered above, buzzing faintly in the cold. I could almost hear a baby crying somewhere in the distance, or maybe it was just my mind replaying what I'd lost. I decided I wouldn't knock again. That night, I heard a baby's cry through my phone. It was faint at first, mixed with static, the kind that makes you lean closer, unsure if what you're hearing is real. I'd forgotten to remove the shared account on the baby monitor app, the one I'd set up months ago when Emma was still friendly enough to ask for help. The icon flashed green. I hesitated, then tapped it. Curiosity, guilt, habit, call it what you want. The screen opened to the nursery. The lamp on the dresser threw a weak circle of light. Emma paced the floor, her hair pulled tight, face sharp with exhaustion. The baby's wail cut through the quiet again, the sound raw and desperate. She muttered under her breath, words I couldn't catch. Then she turned and shouted something, short, sharp, and my stomach tightened. On the edge of the frame, my son sat in a chair, motionless, staring at nothing. He didn't move to help. I whispered to the dark room around me, "Do something." He didn't. My hands shook as I lowered the phone. The monitor stayed open, and I could still hear the crying. I didn't know whether to close the app or keep watching. That's the problem with family. You can't look away, even when you should. I used to love that house. I remember the morning I helped them paint the nursery, the smell of fresh paint mixed with baby lotion, sunlight spilling across the floorboards. I'd hummed an old tune while setting up the crib, imagining this child's life starting in peace. Now that same room looked like a cage. The mobile above the crib swayed slowly, catching the dim glow from the lamp. The innocence I'd helped build had turned into something uneasy. I recorded a few seconds of the feed without thinking. Maybe to protect them, maybe to protect myself. I couldn't tell anymore. My thumb hovered over the stop button while Emma kept pacing, whispering harshly. The baby's cries quieted to small gasps. My heart hurt with every sound. The clock on my nightstand showed 2:17 a.m. I hadn't planned to be awake this late, yet the air around me felt too charged to sleep. When Emma finally left the nursery, I saw my son stand and rub his face with both hands. He looked older than I remembered. Guilt or fear, maybe both, hung in the slump of his shoulders. I closed the app. The screen went black, but the crying stayed in my head. I sat in silence, trying to justify what I'd done. It was an accident, I told myself. I didn't mean to invade anything. But the truth didn't settle right. I knew I'd crossed into their world again, even if by accident. By morning, my phone buzzed. A message from Emma. "You need to stay out of our lives. This is harassment." I read it twice before realizing she must have seen the access log. She knew I'd been there. My first thought was to explain, but every word I tried sounded like an excuse. I was worried. I just wanted to make sure the baby was safe. It was still connected by mistake. None of it would land. She didn't want reasons. She wanted distance. David didn't message me at all. That silence was louder than any accusation. I scrolled through old texts, the ones from before the baby, full of short jokes, grocery reminders, and late-night calls. I noticed how they stopped exactly 2 weeks before the birth. That's when she must have taken control of everything, including him. I thought about deleting the Monitor app, cutting myself off completely. But when I opened the settings, I saw the tiny folder of recorded clips. I didn't delete them. I told myself it was only temporary, just until things made sense. The footage sat there like an unanswered question. At breakfast, I poured coffee I didn't drink. The sun broke weakly through the kitchen window, landing on the framed photo of David as a child, his first day of school, clutching a worn backpack. I ran my finger over the glass. The difference between then and now felt unbearable. I used to know how to help him. Now, I didn't even know if he wanted saving. The phone buzzed again. Another message from Emma. "Delete the Monitor app. It's over." I stared at the words, then typed back, "Done." But I didn't press send. Instead, I slid the phone across the table and left it there. I walked outside, the air cool against my skin, the street empty. Somewhere down the block, a neighbor's dog barked once, then silence returned. Maybe this was what losing family sounded like, a single cry that fades until only the memory echoes. I went back inside, sat down, and finally pressed delete. The app vanished from the screen, but not from my mind. I knew what I'd seen. I knew what it meant. If that's invasion, what do you call neglect? He'd hidden the bills like secrets under old tax files. I wasn't looking for anything that day. I was just cleaning the guest room, folding sheets, and airing out drawers before spring. The bottom one slid open halfway, heavy with old papers. Something inside had jammed the track. I tugged, and the metal gave a small groan. Inside was a folder marked with my son's handwriting, sharp, rushed, familiar. I wish I hadn't opened it, but I did. The paper felt dry, brittle against my fingers. Old utility receipts, grocery bills, a few late notices, then something else, hospital invoices. My eyes caught my own name at the top. The total glared back at me, $28,000. I stared at it so long the numbers blurred. It wasn't possible. My insurance hadn't been active for years, not since I retired. But the document carried my old policy number. Someone had used it. I sank onto the bed, the file slipping open beside me. A smell of paper and ink filled the room. There were notes in David's handwriting, his calculations in the margins, names of clinics, dates that matched Emma's pregnancy. I pieced it together slowly, like a wound reopening one layer at a time. The debt wasn't random. It was theirs. He'd used my identity to cover their hospital bills. My trust had become their safety net. I remembered the day he asked about my insurance last year. We were sitting on my porch, drinking coffee. "Just in case something ever happens," he'd said, smiling. I believed him. I always believed him. The warmth of that memory stung now, replaced by something cold. The truth was simpler and sharper. He'd been planning this long before I knew there was a baby. I found a smaller envelope tucked behind the folder. Inside, a loan statement. His name again. Overdue. Interest climbing. I'd lent him money before, but he'd always paid me back. Not this time. My hands trembled as I stacked the papers, one over another, like layers of betrayal. I wasn't angry yet, only hollow. Anger comes later, once disbelief runs dry. By noon, the light in the room had changed, thin and unforgiving. I looked at the pile of bills and thought of the baby's soft blanket I'd bought, still folded on the chair. I realized every small gesture of kindness I'd made, the gifts, the help, the patience, had been used to build the illusion that everything was fine. It was never fine. I called his phone, but it went straight to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. What could I say? "I found what you hid?" The words would only push him further into her shadow. Emma's voice echoed in my head from the day she screamed at me to leave. Maybe she wasn't protecting the baby at all. Maybe she was protecting the lie. I opened my drawer and took out the small copier I kept for paperwork. I copied each page, careful not to smudge the ink. The hum of the machine filled the quiet, steady, and low. It was a sound I used to associate with work, with order. Now it sounded like survival. I placed the copies in a new folder and labeled it with one word, proof. Then I tucked it inside my closet, behind the stack of linens. For the first time, I stopped thinking like a mother. I started thinking like a witness. Every instinct told me to confront him, to demand an explanation. But something colder held me back. Confrontation would only warn them. The truth needed to sit in the dark for a while, like those papers had sat in his drawer, until I was ready to use it. As I stood by the window, I saw their car pull into the driveway next door. They didn't see me. Emma stepped out first, carrying grocery bags, and David followed, his head bent, phone in hand. They looked ordinary, almost happy. I watched until they disappeared inside. My reflection in the glass stared back, calm but changed. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept thinking about that $28,000. How many years I'd worked to earn it. How easily it vanished from paper to air. The money wasn't the wound. The lie was. He hadn't stolen my savings. He'd stolen my trust. At dawn, I sat at the kitchen table, the copies spread before me. The morning light caught the black ink of his name, my name, tangled together on every page. I traced the edge of one document with my finger and whispered to the empty room, "You used me to save your family, and you broke mine to do it." Now I knew who really paid the price. She asked if I'd heard the screams last night. I froze mid-step in the yard, holding a watering can, pretending I hadn't. Mrs. Larson stood on the other side of the fence, her elbows resting on the wood, her voice low enough to sound casual, but edged with concern. She was the kind of neighbor who noticed things, curtains drawn too early, lights left on too late. I managed a small smile and shook my head. No, I must have slept through it. Her brow furrowed. Sounded bad. Something about the baby's name. You sure you're okay over there? I nodded again, a lie too easy for someone who's had practice. They're just adjusting. The lie tasted bitter, like old coffee. Behind her, smoke drifted from her toaster vent, that faint burnt toast smell that somehow reached all the way to my porch. It clung to the morning air, mixing with the ache already sitting in my chest. She hesitated, eyes narrowing, as if deciding whether to press further. You know, Helen, if you ever need anything— I'm fine, I cut in. Too quick, too sharp. She straightened, reading the signal. Of course, she said softly. Just thought I'd ask. Then she turned and walked back toward her kitchen door. The screen clattered shut behind her. The quiet after she left felt heavier than her questions. The baby's cry from last night still echoed in my mind, small, frightened, cut short. I hadn't slept well since that night with the monitor. I deleted the app, but the guilt never really left. Every sound from next door hit me like a test I was failing. Around 9 a.m., I sat at my table with a half-eaten slice of toast and the morning paper open to an article about neighborhood safety. The irony wasn't lost on me. My hands trembled as I reached for the cup, the surface rippling slightly. What would Mrs. Larson think if she knew the truth? That the woman she heard wasn't the one being hurt, but the one who controlled every cry inside that house? The mailbox clicked outside. I stepped out and caught sight of a white envelope half sticking from the slot. Just a reminder from the power company, but even the bills seemed to carry tension now. My name, their address, our invisible connection. I held the paper longer than necessary before tucking it under my arm. That's when I noticed Emma's car wasn't in the driveway. The sight should have eased me. It didn't. By late afternoon, I was cleaning the porch rail when a message buzzed on my phone. Emma again. Stop talking to outsiders. That was all it said. No greeting, no name, no question mark. I stared at it for a long time, the sunlight hitting the screen, just enough to blur the words. My pulse thudded in my ears. She knew about Mrs. Larson's visit. She was watching everything. I typed 3 different replies. I didn't. She asked first, "You're overreacting," then deleted them all. Any answer would only feed her power. Instead, I turned the phone face down on the table and went back to scrubbing the railing. The paint chipped easily, white flakes gathering near the edge. It reminded me of all the quiet ways things decay, slow, invisible, until one day it's too late to fix. At dusk, when the air cooled and the street emptied, I saw Mrs. Larson watering her garden again. She didn't look my way. That distance hurt more than her questions. I wanted to tell her she was right, that something inside that house was breaking, but I couldn't. Protecting my son still felt like instinct, even if he no longer protected me. I poured myself a small glass of wine and sat near the window. Through the thin walls, I heard muffled arguing, then silence. The kind that doesn't calm, it just pauses. I checked the clock, 7:42 p.m. I remember because the second hand seemed louder than usual, ticking against the stillness. When the baby finally cried again, the sound came softer this time, almost pleading. I gripped my glass so tightly my knuckles whitened. Every part of me wanted to rush next door, but I stayed still. The stakes had shifted. I wasn't just an unwelcome guest anymore. I was being treated like an enemy. I turned off the lights and stood by the window until the arguing stopped. Somewhere behind me, the toaster ejected a slice I'd forgotten I made. The burnt smell filled the room, sharp and familiar, wrapping the day in its bitter edge. That night, I sat at my desk with a blank notebook. I wrote the date at the top of this page. Then I wrote what I heard, what I saw, and what she'd texted me. Every detail, clean and factual. No emotion, just record and reason. The way I'd been trained years ago in nursing, observe first, feel later. When I was done, I closed the book, placed it in the drawer, and whispered into the stillness, "So this is how we start." That night, I started writing everything down. They said someone had reported me for harassment. The woman's voice on the phone was polite, rehearsed, but each word landed like a small blade. I stood by the kitchen counter, staring at the half-open window where sunlight touched the sink. "You're calling from where?" I asked. She repeated it. "Social services, family division." "We've received a complaint, ma'am. It concerns unwanted contact with your daughter-in-law." I felt my chest tighten. "Unwanted contact?" I echoed. "I sent a message asking if the baby was healthy." There was a pause, then the voice again, calm and official. "We're just verifying details. Could you confirm your address?" I did, slowly, watching my own handwriting tremble as I noted her name, the time, the department number. Old habits die hard. Years of nursing had taught me. When chaos hits, document everything. The clock on the wall read 10:11 a.m. Outside, a delivery truck idled, its engine humming through the window. Ordinary life kept moving, as if mine hadn't just been redefined by a stranger's voice. "Can I ask," I said quietly, "who filed the report?" Another pause, then the careful answer, "I'm not at liberty to share that." But I already knew. Emma. It was her style. Turn defense into attack before anyone sees the truth. My stomach burned with something between shame and fury. I'd raised her husband, to be honest. Somehow, he'd learned silence instead. I kept my tone even. "You'll want the full picture then." I walked to the drawer where I'd kept the photocopies, those invoices, the proof of how they'd used my insurance. My fingers brushed the folder's edge, steady now. "I can provide documentation," I said. The woman hesitated, probably surprised by my composure. "That won't be necessary at this stage," she replied, though I could hear the faint shuffle of a pen on her desk. She was writing it down anyway. When the call ended, I stayed frozen in place, listening to the faint click as the line disconnected. The house was silent. Only the refrigerator hummed, a sound that suddenly felt too loud. On the counter, an unopened envelope from the mail waited. The bold black letters across the front read, "State of Illinois, Family Affairs Division." The timing couldn't have been worse. I tore it open carefully. A formal notice, my name printed in capital letters, words like review, complaint, conduct. My hands trembled. I'd spent my life following rules, helping people, caring for their families. Now, someone had turned those same systems against me. It wasn't just about distance anymore. It was about erasure. The memory of that morning at the porch flashed again. Emma's voice screaming for me to leave. Her control wasn't limited to that doorway anymore. She had found a way to police my reputation, too. I sat down slowly, flattening the letter on the table, smoothing the creases like a wound I couldn't stitch. At noon, I brewed coffee I didn't drink. The bitter smell filled the air. Every small movement, pouring, stirring, placing the cup, felt deliberate, mechanical. I needed something to ground me. I opened my notebook, the one where I'd started writing everything down, and added a new entry. I recorded the call word for word, the envelope, the date, documentation. It was no longer just protection. It was survival. By 1:00 p.m., I called the department back. I spoke to a different officer this time, a man whose tone was firm but not unkind. "We take all reports seriously," he said, "but these things are often misunderstandings." "Not this one," I told him. "It's a message. She's warning me not to speak." He was silent for a moment before saying, "Then I'd suggest you keep records of any further contact." "I already am." When I hung up, the fear had shifted into something clearer. They wanted to make me look unstable, obsessive, dangerous. The more I defended myself, the more that label would stick. So I wouldn't defend. I would prove. I gathered every letter, every note, every small sign of manipulation into a single file. The papers made a soft sound as I stacked them, like breath between heartbeats. I thought of Emma sitting at her computer, typing her complaint, painting me as the villain. She'd underestimated me. I wasn't the kind of woman who folded quietly. Not anymore. Later that evening, the street grew dark. A faint hum from a neighbor's lawnmower drifted through the window, blending with the memory of that official voice. I stood at the window, watching porch lights flicker on one by one. Each light reminded me that truth, once written, doesn't disappear. It stays, waiting for daylight to catch it. I placed the social services letter in the same folder with the invoices, sealing both inside a larger envelope marked simply evidence. I tucked it beneath the notebook and whispered to myself, steady and sure, if they want a record, I'll give them one. Her laughter echoed, while my son stayed silent. It came from a small file buried inside an auto backup folder I didn't know existed. My son's account had synced to my email weeks ago, one of those small conveniences he'd set up when the baby was born. I almost deleted the folder, thinking it was storage clutter. But curiosity can be cruel when mixed with suspicion. The first clip began with the soft rattle of a toy, then her voice, sweet, playful, until it wasn't. "Say it, sweetheart. No, Grandma. Say no, Grandma." The baby made a small cooing sound, and she laughed, a long, delighted sound that chilled me. I pressed replay. Once, twice, 3 times, as if repetition would change its meaning. It didn't. I sat there, phone in hand, the morning light dull against the table. The clip ended with silence, then a faint sigh. Her words stayed like smoke in the air. "Forget Grandma." I couldn't breathe for a moment. The betrayal wasn't in what she said. It was in the joy behind it. I clicked another file. More laughter, another taunt. My son's voice entered this time, low, uneasy. "Emma, stop recording." "Why?" she replied. "It's just a joke." He didn't answer. The silence that followed said everything I needed to know. The screen blurred as my eyes stung. My own son, sitting there, letting her twist my name into something to erase. I used to imagine that baby growing up with stories, pictures, the kind of gentle memories that tie generations together. Now they were rewriting me out of his life before he could even form a word. At 11:05 a.m., I began saving the files, each one labeled by date, tiny fragments of proof. The cloud icon kept flashing, little dots spinning as they downloaded. I watched each progress bar fill, steady and mechanical, while something colder filled me inside. I'd spent months trying to reason, to hope, to forgive. But you can't reason with someone who's already decided you don't exist. When the last file saved, I opened the drawer where I'd kept my flash drives. One was still sealed in its package, part of a bulk order I'd once used for nursing files and family photos. I slit the plastic open with a kitchen knife and slid it into the port. The files transferred one after another until the drive blinked green. A soft click signaled completion. I removed it and held it between my fingers, small, light, but heavy with truth. I looked around the room. The baby toy I'd bought months ago sat on the counter, still wrapped in cellophane, a rattle shaped like a small lamb. I'd planned to give it to him on my next visit. Now it looked like an artifact from a life that didn't belong to me. My phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Emma. "Don't send gifts anymore. We have everything we need." I didn't reply. The words felt calculated, perfectly timed, like she knew I'd just found something she couldn't control. I turned off notifications and placed the phone face down. For a long time, I listened to the faint ticking of the wall clock. Every second marked distance between who I used to be and what I was becoming. When you're accused, ignored, and finally erased, there's a quiet point where grief burns itself out. What's left isn't peace, it's purpose. I opened my notebook again and wrote down every detail: date, file name, what I heard, what was said, how it made me feel. I wrote until my hand cramped. Then I added a final line. Silence is still a sound, because even when they stop talking to you, the things they leave unsaid speak louder. That afternoon, I walked to the small electronics store near the grocery. The man behind the counter recognized me from before. "Back for another drive?" he asked. "Yes," I said, "and a case for it." He smiled, bagged my items, and handed me the receipt. $28. Proof has a price. By evening, I'd hidden the drive inside an old cookie tin in the pantry. Not paranoia, just precaution. I wasn't planning to confront them yet, not until they couldn't deny what I'd found. Control, for the first time, had shifted quietly my way. I poured a glass of water, the air still around me. Somewhere in the house next door, the baby's faint cry carried through the night wind. I pictured him there, innocent, surrounded by adults pretending to protect him while teaching him to forget. I went back to my desk and pressed play one more time. Her laughter filled the room again, distorted through the small speaker. I turned the volume down until it was barely audible, a whisper wrapped in static. I whispered back, steady, almost calm. "You can erase my name from your lips, but even silence has witnesses." He ordered black coffee and couldn't meet my eyes. The waitress had barely set it down before he pushed the cup away, steam curling between us like a thin wall. I stirred my tea slowly, the sound of the spoon against porcelain sharp in the quiet cafe. His hands were folded too neatly, like he'd rehearsed how to sit before he arrived. "You look tired," I said softly. He gave a short laugh. "Emma's been under stress." "Stress doesn't make people cruel," I replied. He flinched. The silence between us stretched. Around us, morning chatter filled the space, people talking about weather, bills, errands. The normalcy of it almost mocked us. I took a small sip of my tea. It was bitter, too strong. "You used my insurance, David," I said finally. "You signed under my name." He looked up for the first time. "I was going to tell you," he murmured. "When? After the notice arrived?" His fingers tightened around the cup. "It wasn't like that. We needed it. Emma's been pushing, her family." He stopped, catching himself, like even mentioning them broke some rule. "Her family what?" I asked. "They're watching everything," he said quietly. "Every message, every call. She doesn't trust anyone." I leaned back, letting his words settle. "Including me." He said nothing. That silence was answer enough. For a moment, I saw flashes of him as a child, how he used to hide behind me when frightened, his small hand clutching my sleeve. That memory pressed hard against the man in front of me, hunched over his untouched coffee, terrified of his own life. "David," I said, steady but low, "this isn't about her anymore. It's about what she's doing to you." He looked up again, his eyes glassy. "You don't understand what it's like." "I understand manipulation when I see it." He shook his head. "She's not what you think." "She doesn't have to be. The evidence speaks for itself." That word, evidence, made him shift in his seat. I let it hang there. My phone, face down beside the napkin, had been recording since he sat down. His confession, soft as it was, would survive his denials. I wasn't proud of it, but pride had stopped protecting me weeks ago. He sighed and reached for his coffee, finally taking a sip. "I'll pay it back," he whispered. "Every dollar." "It's not about the money," I said. "It's about your silence." He looked confused, almost offended. "You think I don't care?" "I think you've forgotten what caring costs," I answered. He leaned forward, voice breaking. "You have no idea what I'm living with." "Then tell me." He hesitated, his lips parting, then pressed shut again. "She wouldn't want me here this long." That told me everything. He wasn't my enemy. He was trapped. And I was sitting across from him, still expecting the son I raised to fight for himself. The waitress returned, placing the bill between us. He slid a 20 across the table, a small performance for whoever might be watching. "Keep the change," he muttered, eyes still down. I caught the tremor in his hand as he folded the napkin into a tight square. That motion, small, nervous, repeated twice before he stood. "I'll call," he said, not meeting my gaze. "Will you?" He hesitated, then turned and walked out. Through the window, I watched him pause by his car, checking his phone like he was waiting for permission to leave. My throat tightened. Whatever control she had over him, it was total. I sat there a while longer, staring at the half-empty cup. The bitterness lingered on my tongue, a taste I couldn't wash away. The receipt fluttered slightly in the breeze from the door, and I pressed it flat with my palm. The world around me kept moving, cash registers ringing, conversations rising and falling, but I'd already slipped into a different kind of silence. When I finally stood, I tucked the napkin into my purse. It smelled faintly of coffee and fear. My phone's screen lit up, the recording timer still running. I stopped it, saved the file, and renamed it in one word: David. Outside, the light had turned sharp. I could feel it on my face as I walked toward the car. The clarity hurt almost as much as the betrayal. He wasn't protecting her anymore. He was surviving her. And for the first time, my anger shifted. It wasn't about revenge now. It was about rescue. As I turned the key in the ignition, I whispered to myself, if she controls him, I'll free him differently. The letter warned me to stop interfering immediately. It arrived folded inside a thick envelope, the kind with a gold-embossed seal that catches your thumb before you even read the words. The paper felt heavy, deliberate. My name was printed neatly across the top, followed by phrases like cease and desist and emotional manipulation. I read the first paragraph twice before my brain caught up with my pulse. I'd been accused, formally, of harassment. The absurdity almost made me laugh. But then I felt the fear settle in my chest. Someone had taken the family's cruelty and dressed it in law. I set the letter flat on the kitchen table. The embossed seal left a faint ridge beneath my palm. I traced it once, steadying my hand. So this is how they fight, I whispered. At 9:40 a.m., I called Mary. She'd worked for a county attorney's office before retirement, sharp-minded, practical, never easily shaken. "Bring it over," she said. "Don't answer yet." By the time I reached her house, the letter was creased from where I'd gripped it too tight. Mary poured coffee into chipped white mugs and read every line in silence. When she finally looked up, her eyes were cold. "They're testing you," she said. "They want fear on paper before truth ever arrives." "So what do I do?" "Document everything, then respond once, calmly. That's how you cut through their noise." Her advice was simple, but something in her tone grounded me. We sat together for hours, the afternoon light dimming across her desk as we sorted through copies, hospital bills, payment confirmations, insurance records, all with dates and amounts neatly circled. My handwriting shook, but the facts didn't. When she spoke again, it was quieter. "Include these copies in your reply. Make them see what's real." I nodded, and we began drafting. I typed while she dictated the phrasing. "To whom it may concern, your letter dated March 12th accuses me of actions unsupported by evidence. I have enclosed documentation verifying the transactions in question, totaling $4,860 in unauthorized medical billing. I expect acknowledgement of receipt." She leaned back. "Perfect. No emotion, just precision." I read it aloud once more, slower this time. The calmness in the words felt foreign but powerful. This wasn't pleading. It was record-keeping. As we packed the documents into a manila folder, Mary looked at me and said, "You've spent months defending your heart. Now defend your name." Her words landed deep. For the first time, the legal tone didn't intimidate me. It motivated me. By 5:00 p.m., I was back home. I placed the signed response beside the original letter, side by side, like mirror images of war. The embossed seal still caught the light from the window, glinting coldly. I thought about Emma's parents reading my reply, realizing their warning hadn't worked. They'd expected fear. They'd get paperwork. I slid both letters into a clear binder and labeled it correspondence. The binder clicked shut with a clean sound that almost felt like punctuation. Later that night, I ran my fingers along the edge of the envelope again. It no longer burned. It steadied me. These papers, the ones they sent to silence me, were now part of my defense. I took out a fresh sheet of paper and wrote a single line across the top. They wanted silence. They got signatures. Her smile was wide, but her eyes screamed confession. I stared at the photo glowing on my screen. A friend had tagged me, some innocent social update from years ago, but what caught my eye wasn't nostalgia. It was the table in the background, the stack of pastel gift bags, and the one with my handwriting. My name was still on the tag, but someone had drawn a line through it and written, "To Margaret" instead. The baby shower had been mine to celebrate. They'd rewritten it into theirs. The longer I looked, the colder my hands felt. Every ribbon in that photo looked familiar. The silver frame I'd mailed, the embroidered blanket, the small envelope that had held a check for $150, all right there, repackaged. It wasn't just theft, it was theater. They hadn't stolen the things, they'd stolen the meaning. At 10:20 a.m., I took a screenshot. Then I saved the original post, the comments, the caption. "So grateful for family generosity," Emma's sister had written. I could almost hear her voice as I read the words aloud. Gratitude weaponized into mockery. I leaned back, staring at the screen until my eyes blurred. It wasn't the money. It was the rewrite. I remembered wrapping those gifts, my living room full of soft paper and ribbons, thinking I was part of something sacred. Now I realized I'd only been funding their performance. I opened the old receipts folder on my laptop. There it was, every purchase listed with timestamps, proof layered against performance. The trail was neat, unbroken. I dragged the new photo into the evidence folder, naming it Photo Sequence 9. Then I stared at the folder icon for a long time. It looked too clean for what it contained. When I called Mary to tell her, she exhaled sharply. "You're sure it's the same gift?" "I wrapped it myself," I said. "My handwriting, my card." She just crossed my name out. "Then stop reacting. Start documenting," she replied. "Paper first, emotion later." Her words steadied me. I printed the image and slipped it into the growing binder, the one that had started with hospital bills and insurance records. The pages rustled like witnesses waiting for court. At noon, I made a sandwich I couldn't taste and sat at the table scrolling through the comment section again. The post had 32 likes. I imagined each click as another hand clapping for the lie. The humiliation should have burned, but something else rose instead. Clarity. I opened my email and started typing to a journalist who wrote about domestic fraud and emotional coercion. "Family theft rarely looks like crime," I began. "Sometimes it looks like love, rewritten." I attached the photo, the receipts, and the letter I'd sent to the law firm last week. Then I hovered over the send button. The cursor blinked, steady, like a heartbeat counting down to a new kind of exposure. I thought of that gift bag again. The soft pink tissue paper, the little silver ribbon looped twice because I'd run out of tape that night. I could still feel its texture under my fingers. I'd wanted it to look beautiful when they opened it. I'd never imagined it would end up in a photo that told the world I didn't exist. I took one more deep breath. Somewhere far away, they were still living inside the illusion. But illusions fade when you turn on the right kind of light. I clicked send. The message disappeared, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel erased. I whispered to myself as the screen dimmed. I hit send on the email that changed everything. By noon, our family secret was on the local news. The reporter's voice filled the living room, calm but cutting, each word landing like a gavel. They called it a case of financial deceit within a respected family. The footage showed blurred invoices, highlighted numbers, and short statements from hospital officials confirming unauthorized payments. My name never appeared, but the story belonged to me as much as it did to them. The television light flickered across the room, catching on the framed photo of the baby I hadn't been allowed to see in months. The sound of the reporter's voice mixed with the faint hum of the refrigerator. Everything ordinary felt charged. Every silence carried weight. I sat on the edge of the couch, hands clasped, trying to breathe. The journalist had promised anonymity. Still, anyone who knew us could put it together. By 12:30, my phone started buzzing. Texts, missed calls, emails. "Is this about Emma? Are you okay?" Did you really report your own family? I didn't answer any of them. The truth didn't need commentary, it only needed air. At 1:10 p.m., David came to the door. He didn't knock. He pushed it open and stood there, pale and shaking. "What did you do?" he demanded. I looked up at him, steady. "I told the truth." He laughed once, bitter. "You destroyed her." "She destroyed herself," I said quietly. "I just stopped cleaning up after her." He took a step closer, voice breaking. "She's filing for separation. She says it's because of this." I nodded slowly. "Maybe freedom has a cost." He froze. "You sound proud." "No," I said. "Just finished." He sank into the chair opposite me, staring at the muted TV screen, where the headline still scrolled. "Family fraud allegations under investigation." His shoulders slumped. For the first time, I saw how small he looked inside his own guilt. "They're calling me too," he whispered. "Her parents, her friends, everyone wants to know what I'll say." "And what will you?" He hesitated. "I don't know yet." "Then say nothing. Let the facts speak." He looked down at his hands, rubbing his thumb across his wedding ring. "She says you're lying." "She always does." The silence that followed was thick. I could hear the faint sound of the newscaster moving on to weather, as if nothing monumental had just unfolded. I turned the TV volume down and spoke softly. "You once told me truth didn't matter if no one believed it. You were wrong. It matters even when it hurts." He exhaled, long and uneven. "They'll never forgive you." "I'm not asking them to." His eyes glistened. "You think this fixes anything?" "No, but it stops the pretending." He looked around the room like he was searching for something familiar that wasn't broken. His gaze landed on the open binder on the table. Documents, letters, photographs, every page a history of silence turned into evidence. He didn't touch it. He didn't have to. Finally, he stood. "I don't know what happens next." "Then start by telling the truth, even if it's only to yourself." He nodded once and left without closing the door. When he was gone, I sat back down. The muted television replayed the segment, now looping through the closing credits. I stared at the screen flicker, the blurred invoices, the scrolling text. My name wasn't there, but I could hear it in the cadence of the story, in the way the reporter's tone softened near the end. I'd spent months afraid of being erased. Now the truth had found its own stage, loud enough for everyone to hear. Calls kept coming. I turned the phone face down and let it ring. Outside, a car door slammed, then quiet again. I looked at the binder, then at the screen, and whispered, "It's done." For the first time, I didn't feel small. The lies that had ruled our home were now just words on paper, being read by strangers who couldn't unsee them. The truth was louder than her screams now. He asked if I wanted to press charges. His voice was steady, almost rehearsed, the kind that carries both authority and patience. The badge caught the afternoon light as he stood by my doorway, clipboard in hand. I nodded for him to come in, and he stepped inside, removing his hat with quiet respect. He laid the documents on my table, official pages stamped and signed. My own name appeared near the top, under the heading Complainant. It felt strange, almost foreign, to see it there after so many months of being used as someone else's property. He explained the situation clearly: the insurance misuse, the confirmed records, the written admission from the hospital billing department. The fraud trail was complete. "You have the right," he said, "to press charges for identity misuse or to settle for restitution through counsel." I looked at him, then at the folder resting between us. "And what happens if I do nothing?" He met my eyes. "Then she keeps her silence, and you lose the chance to close it properly." The room felt still. David was sitting on the edge of the sofa, hands clasped tight. He hadn't spoken since the officer arrived. When I glanced at him, I saw the same exhaustion I carried, only his was soaked in shame. "I don't want revenge," I said finally, "just correction. I want my name restored." The officer nodded slowly, writing that down word for word. His pen clicked once, twice. "Restitution only. not criminal. Yes, I said. Let her repay what she took. That's enough. He paused, studying me for a moment, then said, That's a rare kind of strength. I didn't feel strong. I just felt done. He went over the details again, amounts, dates, the restitution process. Each number felt less like loss and more like reclamation. The total was $4,860, the same figure Mary had circled on the hospital statements weeks ago. For once, the number didn't feel heavy. It felt exact. When I signed the report, the paper was firm under my hand. My fingers no longer trembled. The pen moved cleanly, my signature sharp and even. The officer placed a copy of the report in a clear sleeve and slid it across to me. "Keep this somewhere safe," he said. "It's your protection." I nodded. "Thank you." He gave a faint smile. "We'll follow up once restitution is confirmed." After he left, the house felt quieter, but fuller somehow, as if order had crept back in through the open door. David still sat there, staring at the report on the table. He spoke softly. "You could have had her arrested." "I know." "Why didn't you?" "Because prison doesn't teach remorse, but debt might." He looked up, confusion flickering into something like understanding. "You're still giving her a chance." "I'm giving myself one," I said, "to stop carrying her guilt." He leaned back, eyes wet. "I don't think I can ever fix this." "You can start by seeing it clearly," I replied. "That's the first repair." He nodded, though his expression said he didn't yet believe it. I stood, gathered the papers, and slid them into the same binder that had followed me through every battle. The click of the clasp sounded final. Outside, the sun had shifted, lower, throwing thin lines of gold across the floor. I ran my thumb over the smooth surface of the police report. The embossed seal caught the light, solid and untouchable. My name was there, centered and spelled right, for once attached to truth instead of manipulation. It didn't feel like victory, not yet, but it felt real. I placed the binder on the shelf beside the framed photo of the baby, then turned off the television that had replayed my family's shame for days. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was earned. For months, my name had been collateral, something borrowed to buy someone else's comfort. Now it sat where it belonged, on a document that finally meant something honest. Some debts can't be repaid in money. She looked at me and mouthed, "I'm sorry." The words never reached the air, but I saw them form, slow and deliberate, like someone tracing regret into fogged glass. The courtroom was small, colder than I expected, the kind of place where truth didn't echo. It just sat between people and waited to be noticed. The judge read the statement with professional calm. The defendant admits to financial misuse under personal gain. Restitution will be arranged in structured installments. Each word landed evenly, without emotion. A clerk typed at steady rhythm beside him. The sound of paper rustling filled the quiet between sentences. I didn't look at Emma right away. I looked at the gavel, the polished wood that had ended so many stories before ours. It gleamed faintly under the window light, steady and precise. When I finally turned my head, her face was pale, her hands trembling on her lap. She wasn't angry now, she was emptied. David sat 2 rows behind her, jaw tight, eyes fixed on the floor. The distance between them spoke louder than any sentence could. The judge continued, explaining repayment terms: 4 years, quarterly installments, automatic deductions from her joint account. I heard the numbers, but they meant less than the silence that followed. The money didn't matter anymore. This was about acknowledgement. When the officer handed me a copy of the order, I touched the edge of the page. It felt rough, not smooth like I expected. Maybe that was fitting. Justice never feels clean. The clerk called the next case, voices overlapping for a moment before quiet returned. Emma's attorney leaned toward her, whispering instructions. She nodded faintly but didn't look up. Then, just before they stood, she turned in her chair and found my eyes. Her lips formed those 2 words again. "I'm sorry." No one else saw it. No one else needed to. The apology wasn't for the record. It was for the wreckage between us. And though I didn't respond, something inside me loosened. I remembered the first time she called me family. We were standing in my kitchen 2 summers ago, laughing over dinner. I had believed her then. That memory pressed against this moment like 2 photographs overlapped, one full of light, one drained of it. The judge's gavel came down, a single, sharp sound. Case concluded. I stood slowly, gathering the documents, my fingers brushing against the embossed seal. David rose too, but didn't meet my eyes. He followed Emma toward the door, his steps heavy. I watched them pass, the space between them wide enough to fit all that had broken. A court officer approached. "You can wait for certified copies, ma'am." I shook my head. "I don't need them." He frowned slightly. "They're yours to keep." "I already kept what mattered," I said softly. He nodded, stepping aside. As I turned toward the exit, sunlight spilled across the floor through the tall window. Dust hung in the beam, moving slow and weightless. The sound of the judge's pen clicking behind me marked the final note of it all. One life closed, another beginning quietly. Outside, the air felt lighter. People passed by without knowing what had just ended inside that small room. I thought I'd feel triumphant, but what I felt was stillness, the kind that comes when something long overdue finally stops hurting. I didn't look back at the building. There was nothing left to collect. Somewhere behind me, the judge was still reading the last lines of the ruling, his voice fading into the hum of the hallway. I walked out before they finished reading. The crib was gone, but the smell of milk remained. It hit me the moment I stepped inside, faint, almost ghostly, yet warm enough to stop me mid-breath. The nursery looked smaller without the furniture. The rocking chair stood alone in the corner, its slow sway driven by the draft from the open window. The light touched the walls unevenly, as if memory itself was shifting across them. David's apartment was modest, quiet. The carpet still carried moving box lines, and half the shelves were empty. He'd done what people do after storms. They rebuild, not out of hope, but out of habit. He appeared behind me, voice low. "I didn't think you'd come." "I almost didn't," I said. He nodded, walking past to straighten a stack of folded blankets on the dresser. "The court gave her visitation twice a month. She drops the baby off here now." I glanced at the clock on the wall. It was nearing 6 p.m. The day was dimming, but it didn't feel heavy. "How's he handling it?" I asked. "He cries less when she leaves," he said. "That's progress." His tone was steady, but his hands gave him away, still careful, still rehearsed. I remembered when he couldn't even say her name without breaking. The scent of baby lotion floated through the air again, faint but distinct. It wasn't a reminder of loss anymore. It was proof of continuity. Something remained, even after everything was stripped away. "I came to see how you were doing," I said quietly. He smiled just enough to show restraint. "You don't have to keep checking on me." "I know," I said, "but I wanted to." He looked down, picking up a small rattle from the windowsill. The sound it made was barely audible, but it filled the silence between us like an echo of a lullaby. "I didn't think peace would feel like this," he said after a moment. "How does it feel?" "Strange," he said, "like calm pretending to be emptiness." I stepped closer to the crib's old corner. The indent in the carpet was still there, marking where it had once stood. "That's how healing starts," I told him. Quiet, uneven, easy to mistake for nothing. He let out a breath. "I don't want to hate her anymore." "You don't have to forgive her to stop hating her," I said. "You just have to stop carrying her story like it's yours." He nodded slowly, eyes tracing the soft motion of the rocking chair. The rhythm was steady now, like breathing. "She asked if you'd ever talk to her again," he said. "I have nothing left to say," I answered. "Silence can say enough." He turned toward me. "I think she finally understands what she lost." "Then maybe it's time she keeps that understanding," I said. The air felt lighter between us, not healed, but livable. He motioned toward the door. "You want tea? It's not much, but it's hot." I smiled faintly. "No, thank you. I should get going." He nodded again, softer this time. "Thank you for coming. Really." I reached out, resting my hand on his shoulder. "You're doing better than you think." As I stepped into the hallway, the nursery door stayed open behind me. The smell of milk lingered, gentle, forgiving, almost kind. I paused there, listening. From somewhere deep inside, a memory rose. The old lullaby I used to hum during sleepless nights, back when hope still felt possible. Without thinking, I hummed it again, under my breath. This time, it wasn't for anyone else. It was for me. Walking away, I realized closure isn't about mending what broke. It's about no longer needing to hold the pieces. Peace can sound like an empty room. A white envelope arrived with a familiar handwriting. It sat on the doorstep like a relic, ordinary, quiet, almost polite in its timing. I knew the script immediately, careful loops, even pressure. Emma's hand, the same handwriting that once filled grocery lists, appointment reminders, and insurance forms she shouldn't have touched. For a long time, I didn't move. The mail around it was forgettable. Ads, a bill, a coupon for a grocery store I no longer visited. But that one envelope felt heavier than all of them combined. I picked it up slowly, the paper soft from the cold morning air. Inside, a single check. The amount written in careful strokes, $28,000. Below it, a note in the same measured hand. "For what you paid and what you taught me." No greeting, no signature, just the words that ended a war. I stood by the kitchen counter, the same place I'd once stacked hospital bills and insurance denials. My fingers brushed the edge of the check. It didn't tremble this time. The house was quiet. The clock above the stove read 9:10 a.m. Morning light filtered through the curtains, touching the counter where I'd left the coffee mug half full. I realized I didn't feel anger, not even relief, just a calm certainty that everything had found its place. I walked to the small wooden box where I kept the old records, receipts, letters, the first lawyer's notice. I slid the check inside, not to save it, but to finish the sequence. One final entry. David called later that afternoon. "Did you get it?" he asked, his voice steady but cautious. "Yes." "And?" "I deposited it," I said. "Not for the money, for the closure." He was quiet. Then he said, "She's been in counseling. They say she's doing better." "I hope so," I answered. "Everyone deserves a way back, even from themselves." There was a pause, the kind that carries both gratitude and exhaustion. "You're not going to talk to her, are you?" he asked. "No," I said simply. "That chapter doesn't need a sequel." He exhaled, the sound small but sincere. "You're stronger than any of us thought." "I'm just done," I replied. "That's not strength. That's survival." When the call ended, I looked again at the envelope lying open on the counter. The smell of paper and faint ink lingered, oddly comforting. The same way old lullabies stay in your head even when you've forgotten the words. I whispered the question that had once started it all. "Did they tell you who paid the $28,000 bill?" This time, it wasn't accusation. It was acknowledgement. The house didn't answer, but it didn't need to. I'd learned by now that peace rarely announces itself. It slips in through ordinary moments, a letter, a voice, a silence that finally doesn't hurt. I looked at the front door. The lock had been replaced months ago, but the handle still bore a faint scratch from the night it all began. I opened it slowly, just enough for sunlight to pour across the floor. The wind brushed through, soft and cool. I left it that way. This time, I left the door open. Did you enjoy this story? Tell me which city you're listening from. I read every comment. If the story touched you, you can support the channel with a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this every day. Your encouragement really helps. I'd love to hear your thoughts and what moment stayed with you. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's plenty more on the channel as well. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. See you in the next life story, with respect and gratitude.